Hi everyone, welcome to episode 54 of A Fern Between Us.
We are two of the four owners of E54 Winery. My name is Jesse.
And I'm Michelle. And today's topic is Chardonnay. What makes it great, what makes it terrible, and why you need to know about it, right?
Yes, Chardonnay.
Chardonnay!
One of the best wines there is, actually.
Cheers. We happen to be starting off sipping on our Vivac Chardonnay, and then we're going to get into some of the different Chardonnays and different styles, different wines from around the world. But we're going to do a little check-in and sip on the highly quaffable Vivac Chardonnay.
I never liked the word quaffable. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's not exactly.
It doesn't sound. It's like.
It means it's easy drinking.
I can drink it. That's what that sounds like to me.
That's terrible.
I know. It's like I'll drink it, I guess. That's what I always think of when I hear the word quaffable, even though I know it doesn't mean that, but
I could see that connotation.
Yeah.
I meant it as easy drinking.
Yeah.
We can talk about, do a little check-in while
Yeah.
we're drinking and not have to, we're going to come back to tasting notes. So.
Cool.
All right. Well, let's do a little check-in. How's your week?
My week's good. With Chris and Lily not around or whatever, more duties fall to me, but also more free time. So that's kind of fun in lots of ways. But I did have to do the deliveries today because our driver extraordinaire is out doing stone carving class this week. So
nothing makes you more appreciative like doing the job of someone else, right?
Yeah. So I've been gone all day, drove to Albuquerque and back, visited several accounts. It's fun, but it's also, I like hiring lots of the jobs out. I don't know.
Right?
I've done this before. I know how it works a little bit, and
It's a trip when we think back to in the beginning when we did all of it ourselves, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
We sold the wine to an account, to a restaurant, to a wine shop, and then we delivered it ourselves and
also
made
at
it
the tasting
and
rooms.
marketed it and sold it by hand at the tasting rooms and all of the tastings and all of the behind the scenes work. Oh.
Yeah. Chris and I were making the wine, and then at one point when we opened, we had you and Lily as slave labor 2 days each a week, and Chris and I would have 1 day each a week, and then shifting every other, so 1 week 1 and 1 week 2. And then finally, it didn't last too long before we had to start paying. So we paid for 1 of your days, 1 of Lily's days, and 3.
I actually found another job. I had to move on, and then you started paying.
That's right.
That was fun.
And
I was like, I can't pay the
like
bills.
Right?
I have to get a real job.
And that actually saved us, because
Then
the winery couldn't afford it as much, but also we couldn't pay as well as the new job that you got, and
there were lots of benefits too.
Right, and it was working in a wine shop, so you learned lots of lessons that none of us knew yet, and that was good too.
Absolutely. Became the right-hand lady to a wonderful woman who taught me how to be a wine buyer, and I also got to implement an educational program there, and that was a great job, actually.
It really was. It was awesome.
So we ended up completely off topic here. But
all right,
yeah.
But other than that, I'm doing great.
That's
not
good.
even other than that. I enjoyed
Today.
my day as well. So yeah.
Nice. I can't remember anything. I feel like I am back into the weirdest pandemic fog. I'm like, I don't know what day it is. I don't know if I don't set an alarm that says specifically what I'm doing. I don't know anymore. I'm lost. It's kind of weird. Yeah. Well, so let's jump into Chardonnay.
Okay. Where do you want to start with all this?
So this is big. This is a big subject because it is the queen of grapes.
Do we want to answer one question and then talk about one wine, and answer one question, talk about one wine, that kind of thing? Or do we want to...
We definitely can. One of the first questions is...
Since the topic and the wine happen to be the same thing, it's a unique opportunity. I was warming up unique New York. This is a unique opportunity to integrate the whole thing and not have a question section and a tasting section.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's not that one question has to do with one specific wine, but the way we have it tonight is a example of some of the more typical styles of Chardonnay. So the first wine we should start off with is our bubbly. You always want to start with the lightest wine first. And
so in theory, we shouldn't have been sipping this, really, because this goes third in the lineup.
Boo, sommeliers. But one of the things I like to do is shop from places that you all are shopping to. It doesn't really help to go to some specialty wine shop and tell you about these amazing wines, even though that is absolutely a good idea.
It's part of it.
But
your everyday life is...
If we're trying to show you something, I want you to be able to get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And so I go to the grocery store just like everybody else and buy wine there. So these adorable little Sophia cans are amazing. They're one of the first producers putting things in cans. This is years and years and years ago. They come with like this little straw.
Wow.
So that you can actually sip out of the can. So cute, little like party in a can. I mean, this speaks to so many people. It's pink, it's cute, it's actually a decent product.
I still would just drink it out of the lip of the can, out of the can, just like that.
Then
better.
You get lipstick all over the can.
Oh, well, if I'm not wearing lipstick.
And you get like really high off of drinking bubbles out of a straw.
I'm also not going to drink beer out of a straw either, but even if it's served with one.
Sometimes you drink it straight out of a keg, so
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
Somehow that's different.
So super cute.
Ode to Boulder days.
So super cute.
Half
little
the time
can.
upside down.
Yeah. One of the things is that you are looking for a Blanc de Blanc on your champagne or sparkling wine. So that's an important thing.
Do you want to pour the rest in there, or you were just going to pour this much?
I was just going to do that much and go from there. But so that means it's Chardonnay. So that's a really important clue in. If it's just Brut, it's a combination with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier.
And each producer will be different. So some producers will be heavy Chardonnay, some producers will be heavy Pinot.
But a Blanc de Blanc is all Chardonnay. Yeah. And so that's an important thing to be looking for. And oddly, at the grocery store, they didn't have bottles of Blanc de Blanc unless you wanted to like throw down some serious dough. And I'm sorry, you guys, we're opening several things. It wasn't going to happen for you. But this little Sophia can is Blanc de Blanc.
Cool.
So it's not a traditional méthode champenoise, but it's going to get the point across.
Yeah, nothing in a can is going to be méthode champenoise. Just for a brief, this is not our topic today, but méthode champenoise is where it sits in a bottle and rests on the yeast holes, the dead yeast cells that they leave it in there for a number of months, 12, 18 being really good, and then slowly tip it over and pull those out.
With the secondary sugar yeast.
And so so anything that's not that is going to be less yeasty, less cakey.
But they did a nice job.
They're really good. I mean, you could still get those qualities a little bit in the tanks, but it just won't be as intense as...
I feel like they probably had the Chardonnay wine itself in some oak to give it a little bit of those kind of attributes, and then they sparkled it.
Yeah.
So that it kind of is reminiscent. It's a decent little wine. They're inexpensive. But if you want to invest in a Blanc de Blanc, of course, our friends at Gruet make fabulous Blanc de Blanc. If you have a special occasion, their Gilbert Reserve is phenomenal. And then...
Is that a Blanc de Blanc?
It is. Okay. Yeah. And then, of course, the world of sparkling wine and champagne is huge and vast. Most houses that are making a sparkling wine or a champagne are absolutely doing Blanc de Blanc as one of their lineup, and then you get into vintage or non-vintage. So we're not going to touch that right now. But
Don't worry about it.
This is a great expression of Chardonnay. And the reason being that it's so clear and clean cut. It definitely shows the where it's from, and that's one of these. That's why it's going to be more expensive when you get into some of these elite wines too.
Right. But yeah, no. I was, yeah.
Yeah. So so I think that that's a really interesting aspect.
I know what I was gonna say.
Yes, please.
For sparkling production, they pick the grapes under ripe. No matter what you're doing. So you're seeing more fermentation process rather than true varietal character. But because we're talking about Chardonnay today, we have to include this because it's Champagne and is built on Blanc de Blanc, and Blanc de Blanc is one of the most famous wine styles there is, and it's all Chardonnay pretty much. So.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's one of the most famous styles of Chardonnay. Important to know about. Another aspect, I'm going to skip the first question. We're going to come back to that. But one of the things that we're hitting, since it happens to be on topic, is 5 things to know about Chardonnay. So that's the first one, that you should know that it's one of the staple, most iconic champagnes.
Yeah.
The next wine is a still wine from Burgundy.
Oh, yes.
Most people are a little confused about Burgundy and what that means. If you're of a certain generation, you might have remembered the big jug wines that were, Chablis.
Chablis, Burgundy.
And they weren't very good. But what it was, Chablis is Chardonnay, and a white Burgundy is Chardonnay. Yep. So this is actually from Beaune, which is in the Côte d'Or. And this is Joseph Drouhin, and you can find this in most stores. It is a great example of a clean Chardonnay from Burgundy, so you get that chalky kind of element.
Reasonable price, kind of?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And
so Burgundy, folks, is like, there's 2 grapes mostly grown there. Champagne is one of the regions of Burgundy, but it's its own thing, but it's extreme north. Chablis is right outside of Champagne, and it makes still wines, and they're super high acidity. They can barely get them ripe. Some years they can get them decently ripe. Most years they can't. And then Burgundy sits a little further south, the main Burgundy. There's lots of subdivisions within Burgundy, of course, but they're all producing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
Yep. And one of the things that you're looking at is oaked or not oaked. And that's part of the Chablis region allure, is that it's unoaked. And part of that is to really showcase the terroir, the chalky soils, the clean, clear fruit aspect. They're really, really lovely. And often it blows people's mind to taste something from Burgundy when they've grown up with American, especially grocery store Chardonnays.
Yeah.
And we'll get into what a grocery store Chardonnay is and why that's so different here.
It's a whole different ballpark.
It is almost like tasting a completely different wine, which is really interesting.
Exactly.
And so it's so accessible, but so lovely. I really I like that mineral aspect. I love that in wine.
It's so minerally. On the chalkier soils in that region, they plant Chardonnay. On the granite soils, they plant Pinot Noir. So you do get this kind of real yummy, chalky, just clean. It's more of a
citrus, lots of lime.
It's on the lighter side of a medium-bodied white. It's almost over to a light-bodied white. I mean, it's so lighter than a Sauv Blanc, or in the realm of like a Sauv Blanc.
So this is actually perfect timing, because one of the things that I have been seeing is some of the famous winemakers that produce Chardonnay talk about how malleable the grape is, and that it really shows a great artistic interpretation by the winemaker. And that's one of the few grapes that lends itself to the artistry of the winemaker while also showing where it's from. Do you feel that that's true for you and Chris?
I think Chris and I are still getting our sea legs with whites, honestly. I don't feel like we're perfecting all that just yet. I feel like we're not hit and miss quite, but like we're still honing our skills, and we don't have quite all the right equipment. This new press that we're going to hopefully get this year should help us a long ways down that road towards totally refining what we really do with Chardonnay.
Gotcha.
But we're getting Chardonnay both from down south and from up north. The grapes, and they're totally different animals. So trying to figure out where, do we have two Chardonnays? Do we blend them? Do we, some years we just have the northern, some years we just have the southern, and it's hard to figure out what we're doing and to have like some kind of consistent voice. So it's really hard.
And if it is from our northern estate property, the Abbott Vineyard, then it has that little red emblem that would appear right there that
This
would
one does
say
not have
Abbott. It's a combination of the two.
Okay. Thank you for looking that up.
Yeah. So we didn't feel that we could say it's the Abbott Vineyard because it's a blend of the two. Yeah. So that is interesting. So let's jump into tasting notes on yours.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, we're talking about the 5 things you should know. Burgundy. White Burgundy, that means Chardonnay. It's one of the most prestigious bubbly wines. It's the most planted and sold white wine still around the world, which is really interesting. So noting that versatility for the winemaker's expression and also showing place.
I believe it's grown in every major region, maybe not New Zealand. I don't know.
No, there's
New Zealand has
Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnays.
Yeah,
it's famous for Sauvignon Blanc, so easy to go there. But no, they definitely do.
Okay, cool.
So the question that is kind of laid out there is oak or no oak.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that it can be without oak, and that some of the very best, most expensive are without oak.
Here in the States, we're used to oak. And it's the reason that people love it, and it's also the reason that people hate it. It's the reason it's got a bad reputation in lots of ways, but it's also one of the things that some people just love and crave and look for, because there is something alluring to and so what a lot of people are doing, so in the 80s, 70s, 80s and 90s, like the over oak Chardonnay thing and the over extracted, so that you weren't seeing much grape, you're just getting this oak hit, and a secondary fermentation with malolactic, which added some kind of like some extra flavor, making it
creamy
bigger
and buttery.
And that combined with the oak, and it was like, and it's just this huge wine, even though it's white, and
not necessarily for the better.
Not necessarily for the better, but in some cases it's amazing. I don't know if that's the best expression of the grape, but that's to be argued. That's personal taste,
right?
And but I think the world's retracted, or the U.S. has started retracting, at least in the last 20 years, and giving it a little less oak, a little more subtlety, trying to like push forward some of the aspects of the grape itself.
Yours, we have noted on the website, which I did have to double check, as 4 weeks in oak. for this vintage.
Okay.
So we have adopted what we're calling flash oaking so that it doesn't have a dominant oak characteristic.
Yeah.
How do you decide vintage to vintage how long that flash oaking is? Because I know it changes.
I'm always pushing for less. We do barrel fermentation sometimes for some parts of it.
And why do you do that?
It doesn't impart so much oak flavor, but it just makes like a mouthfeel more, and then just hints of oak. And so that's kind of why we're calling it a flash oaking. We're trying not to do too much post fermentation oak, because it just, I don't know, to me, I'm more in these first two styles. I like a nice clean. I feel like Chardonnay just really wants to speak to you. You know, it's a really good grape, but it's it'll get overrun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that I really like is that this just hints at oak. So I feel like people that really hate the oak objective in some wines really like this Chardonnay, and people that can identify oak or enjoy a more oaky wine, it actually sits pretty well with them too, and it's super wine friendly or food friendly, super wine friendly, which I love too. One of the things that is interesting about Chardonnay in its many styles is how versatile it is when it comes to food pairing. Mm-hmm. So when it is a little more oaky, we love to have popcorn for dinner a lot.
Last night, for instance.
Yes. And it pairs so great. You put some melted butter on there, you put some yeast, you put some Parmesan, and
some red chili, because we're in New Mexico.
And a bigger, bolder version of Chardonnay is really great with it. Yeah. If you don't put anything on your popcorn, a very clean, clear Burgundy style is amazing. Yep. And it's one of the few that I also like when it's unoaked with certain vegetables, which are difficult to pair. Of course, you always want to add salt to anything. That's going to help you out a million times over. But so that's kind of an interesting aspect too. So one of the things before we get into tasting this other wine is the first question, which was, do we make a low carb, low sugar wine? And talking about diet wine. So this is pretty interesting. This has become a fad. I'm sorry.
You texted me this question earlier, and I thought of another way that our wines are a little bit lower carb. All right, so we do less residual sugar, and in most cases that equals less calories, of course. Anything that's sweeter is going to have more calories, and by a long shot even. So the drier your wine is, the better off you are. We also tend to have a little bit lower alcohol, and every alcohol point is going to be more carbs. Those are basically sugars as well. And so if you get a high alcohol sweet wine, that's going to be your worst diet wine. Absolutely. And so that's like those really giant Zinfandels. Right.
Those are, sometimes 18% and lots of residual sugar in order to carry that kind of wine. So you're looking at a lot of alcohol and a lot of RS. So that is a very tricky question to answer. So yes, we absolutely make low calorie, low carb, awesome wines that go with your diet. But
what we're not doing is anything like the zero beers and those kind of things. Like that's not a
process that we're getting into.
Yeah, and not that we probably ever will. That involves like decomposing the entire wine through these mega filters, and then putting back in the ingredients that you want. Like maybe you're just taking out certain aspects of the wine, and
I feel like you're gesturing and you're gonna knock that over. Yes, absolutely.
And so we probably won't ever do like a diet wine or a zero cal or a low cal wine per se, but
yeah. And so a little ground research here, I didn't realize that there are people, as many labels, I should say, out there promoting their diet wine.
Have you found that? No way.
As
all right.
it turns out,
no way.
there
And
are
what are they?
several. The Skinny Girl is one that everybody's kind of gotten used to and seen. But evidently, Weight Watchers has like a line of them. I didn't realize.
No way.
But the biggest thing here is that they're low alcohol. So you're looking at some of these wines are actually 7%. So a normal wine is 11 to 14% alcohol, and so
actually the definition just changed too. So it's 11 to like 15.
Yeah. Well, for this purpose, we're gonna just stick in a zone.
Yeah.
But so if you greatly reduce the alcohol level, which I would guess, I mean,
then you have to drink twice as much, and then you have just as many calories.
Exactly. Or like drink a half glass and actually taste all those flavors. I haven't actually had one of these wines, so I can't say, but I would imagine that they're a little lackluster. I mean, there's no way, unless they get into doctoring it.
I guess, I mean,
they could add flavoring.
All right, two people that haven't tried these, but I would assume you could make an absolutely elegant version of that for daytime use or whatever, but it would have to be a super light and probably white wine, because not enough alcohol. It's just going to taste flat without the alcohol. You need the alcohol to produce. You need alcohol, acidity, and I mean, those are really your two, but then, the flavor component. So like if you're missing any one of those tripod, you have to decrease all of them in order to, so just like you have to have a little bit of residual sugar if you get up to 16% or more, you have to have that, or else the wine just tastes hot. It's going to taste the opposite of hot, which is flat, without the alcohol. And then acidity, same thing. It tastes flabby if it's super high. So like the super high alcohol wines have to have sugar and they have to have extra acid. So, but if you lower the alcohol that much, you're going to have to reduce the acidity. I don't know.
It becomes like this weird thing. And
this weird chemistry.
Yeah. And you're still looking at around 100 calories, and some wines beautifully made, well-structured, or, 120. I think the norm is 125. It goes from 116 to 130 as a range, but you're only talking about 20 to 30 calories, which was, I loved this one little tidbit that I was reading about today that said that's equivalent to 2 stalks of celery. So I think, maybe you splurge on a little bit better wine so that you can have that in your diet. Another thing is that they've done all these, research looking into how is wine beneficial for you. And we all know that they're talking about a little bit of wine in your diet actually causes you to lose more weight while you're on your diet. So that's an interesting thing. But they also are looking into that the polyphenols in red wine might actually prevent fatty foods from being converted into fatty tissue.
Huh.
Yeah, and another one is that it could keep glucose from entering the cells. So they're looking at how wine is digested, especially if it's eaten with food. So it's really a health product. And what I'm trying to get at is absolutely, it is low calorie. It's worth the splurge. You will lose more weight if you are drinking wine with your diet. So it's a win-win.
All right.
So we're going to jump into this...
This last one?
This last one, and it's actually called Creamery.
Ooh.
And
so it should be pretty creamy, we assume.
Yes, and
which means malolactic and probably oak.
Exactly. And I think they did barrel fermentation, and barrel fermentation on this. And so it's going to be a bolder version. Again, when you get into the bigger, bolder versions, you should get bigger, bolder food too.
Man, that's so creamy.
Is it creamery?
I can't even imagine making a wine that tasted like that.
It has a nice nose.
It tastes like a wine version of a yummy cream soda. It's really good.
It tastes like a Werther's original.
Yeah. Wow, you go caramel with it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's that creamy caramel thing.
Yeah, the creamy caramel thing. And then once again, like my usual, an orange push-up a little bit.
Yeah, you do like that analogy. You're an orange push-up. So again, I went for the can, and one of the reasons why is because they're selling cans as single serving. It's a great way to do a tasting and to look at these kind of side by side without necessarily investing in a whole bottle. And of course, a little prelude to our wines will be coming out in cans, so we're fans. But it definitely does not mean a lesser product in a can.
No.
It's the same thing. If you buy the wine in a bottle, so, if you're looking at Barefoot, and I don't think Barefoot does cans, but if they did, still don't drink it.
Right?
So oak aging though. So how do you decide to oak, not to oak? And then also, in addition to that, I'm going to throw at you the ageability factor, because if you age it in oak, it gives it tannin, it can age.
Yep.
One of the few white wines on the planet that can actually age pretty well.
So for us, our deciding factor is we go through fermentation, so we've got a minimal amount of oak in the fermentation, whether that's in barrel or possibly pieces of oak actually in the fermentation itself. And when we come out the other side, by then we know all the numbers, we know what it's tasting like, and we can decide, do we want to put it in barrel a little bit? Like, how much tannins do we have? How much does it need it? It's basically, because we're trying not to. We're basically trying not to. And if it's just fermented in oak, we consider that a perfect treatment for Chardonnay. And we're talking old oak too, by the way.
Yep. Which doesn't impart as much flavor as
Exactly.
like this creamery. What
Exactly.
is the name? Creamery?
Creamery, but the oak thing, the oak
It's
on
pretty
this,
integrated.
that's not the. I would say the creaminess is probably more
Than the oakiness?
out of whack than the. Like, to me, this is too creamy.
It's Sonoma. Okay.
To
more
me,
ripe fruit too.
Yeah, to me this is too creamy, but not too oaked.
Oh, okay.
I love the creaminess, but for a whole bottle, I don't know that I would do it. We're gonna split. We're each gonna have a glass of this, and that'll be awesome. I'm really liking this, but this isn't over oaked, not even close.
All right. So as we talk about aging, so we're looking at that.
So that was
as
a
an
two-part
aspect.
question. All right.
Yeah.
So aging, yeah.
So you need the tannin.
It will promote longevity. The other thing that'll promote longevity is acidity.
Yes.
And Michelle and I tasted in Slovakia. We tasted a Riesling that was already over 10 years old, and it had another 20 years to go. We couldn't even tell that it was more than a day old, and we were drinking out of a bottle that had been open since we don't know when. At least the day before, though. We were the first ones in there that day. It was just out on, it was cold. It was almost refrigerator temperature in that place.
It was freezing.
So
it was like chattering.
It was probably 45 degrees in there or something. And that's where they made their wines and stuff. But then this Riesling sold as a 20-year-old wine for $450 in New York and Beijing, even though the initial wholesale price was $10, I think he said 9 or 12. I can't remember which.
He sold it to us for nothing.
But he said that's the price that he sells it to everybody, even his distributors, his restaurants, the individual people, wholesale, retail, all of it. But that wine just aged and aged and aged, and I've never heard of a 30-year Riesling before that.
Right.
Traditionally, Chardonnay is kind of the aging white wine.
Right. So
I assume theirs was just insane acidity or something like that, which is
undrinkable even.
Which is probably why some of these Chardonnays in some of these older regions can, like Burgundy.
Yes.
The white Burgundies last 20 years for sure.
Yeah.
often. I mean, not every year, but
Yeah, and not every house, but
Right.
or every vintage, but. Lots of great advice. It's all sort of, but
Always.
So ours is available. It's $24, which is actually a phenomenal price for Chardonnay of this style, weight. What it has going on. I think it's a really, really accessible price to get into a well-made, babied, loved little Chardonnay.
Yeah.
It is on the winemaker specs on our website. Unfortunately, not updated. There was a little snafu. So it does say that you need to have drank this by 2020, but that's not true. It is drinking absolutely gorgeous. It is 2018, which does show a little more age, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
So looking at this as a little bit older Chardonnay,
It does
is
have some
doing
age, yeah.
some great aging. And that is an interesting aspect as far as what it would taste like young versus it's starting to get these more kind of baked.
I'm tasting age on
aspects.
this for sure. Mm-hmm. It's definitely starting to age a little bit, but it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. In a very nice way. It's a very different thing. And young Chardonnay versus old Chardonnay is very different too.
Exactly.
So as we come into the end, the third part is simply talking a little bit about the most famous Chardonnays.
Okay.
So, of course, we talked
$1
about...
billion.
Yeah. So, of course, we talked about Chablis. And so you're looking at the Premier Cru. If it says Premier Cru on the label, then be prepared to pay a lot, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And we have been lucky enough in our sommelier educations
To have tasted some of these?
Yes, and to be very lucky in all of these other events that we end up finding ourselves in, where we get to taste these phenomenal wines. General purposes, you don't need... You look into the houses that have Premier Crus and then choose their lower level. Yeah. Usually it says village on the label. Village. I know you couldn't tell with my amazing accent, but that was village.
Yeah.
But that's what you're looking for on the label, so that you then get that same quality crafting, but something a little bit more price friendly.
Yep.
There is Chateau Montelena, of course. So famous Napa wine won the blind tasting in France in 1973.
For their Chardonnay against French Chardonnays.
Yes, blind tasting. So of course people are obsessed.
Yeah.
One guy was so obsessed that he collected all of the 1973 wines that were tasted at that tasting, including a Chateau Montelena just recently at auction for over $11,000.
No way.
Yeah.
Just the one bottle?
Just the one.
That's actually nothing.
It completed his series.
I'm sure that some of the Burgundies he was up against went for almost $1,000 as their sticker price on day one. I mean, not even talking about a vintage.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. But I just thought that was pretty phenomenal.
I've got a little tidbit. Do you got time for like a half a second story?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to make it quick, guys. Anyway, they, the Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. That was written about Chardonnay. It was actually more specifically written about Burgundy. Yeah. So it was Chardonnay, and all the houses that make wine in Burgundy were getting so rich and so powerful because that was the best wine in the world. They'll still tell you it's the best wine in the world, and that's of course debatable, but it's up there. It's great.
And most of them are making Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir was
right.
But
it was the white that
excited
in Napoleon's day. It was the white that they were excited about.
No, it was the Pinot, because then there was the Gamay snafu.
Nope. No, it was always the whites. The whites was what made Burgundy originally.
But then
the red was just because the people like to drink it. But like the royalty were always drinking the whites.
But in Beaujolais, they sectioned it off because they were the only ones that wouldn't rip out the vines and plant Pinot Noir because that was his red wine, and he was like, "That's my red wine," and they fought it, and they were like, "We've always had Gamay, and we're gonna keep planting Gamay," and they were like, "You know what? You're not really part of Burgundy."
Right. That doesn't have anything to do with this part.
Humpty Dumpty.
Humpty Dumpty, though. So anyway, the Napoleonic inheritance laws were written about. All right. So Napoleon didn't like that other people had so much power because they were getting so rich. And so he made inheritance laws, so you had to divide your land. You couldn't consolidate and just leave it to your eldest son, which was the custom at the time.
Yeah,
they just
ladies.
Families just kept getting richer and richer and richer because it was consolidated. So he was like, you have to divide your land every time. And so now, in Burgundy especially, I mean, they made sure it happened in Burgundy. It happened all over France. There are lots of places in France, but they made sure it happened in Burgundy because they were consolidating the wealth so big time that Napoleon was. That's why he said about those laws. So now you can own like literally just one row in a vineyard, and maybe all your grapes go to one wine house or whatever. But they, they'll buy those from you or whatever. Your grapes every year, but they're in control of everything. I mean, it's to have like a 1 acre block is kind of a rare thing now.
Absolutely.
Even though they repealed that.
Some people even have just a couple of vines that they hand down through the generations, which is pretty wild. So, I don't know why I was positive it was Pinot Noir, but I'm glad that you brought up that story. And
the royalty were all drinking Chardonnay out of Burgundy.
That's a great story. And fun little tidbit. Anyway, hopefully you guys learned something. There was lots of questions about how to determine whether or not it is a great Chardonnay or not. A lot of the Chardonnays, they're at the bottom shelf of your grocery store, or even apple wine mixed in with a little Chardonnay. So you are paying for what you get. And so if you've got a couple $1,000 just sitting around and you want to explore those Premier Crus out of Burgundy, buckle in because it should be a wild ride.
Yeah,
so,
good luck.
Right? So what was your favorite out of this lineup? Other than ours was definitely the best.
Other than ours, of course.
Yes.
The white Burgundies, I love that style. I love a bubbly.
I know. They were good representations.
I like it
I
all.
thought they showed well for what we were illustrating.
I like it all.
So next week, we're going to talk about aging, how it works in the winery, how you make those choices for all kinds of different wines.
Nice.
But also how to determine what you should lay down or not in your cellar, how to decide what to buy at the store based on vintage too. So we've gotten lots of questions about that. So we're going to try to tackle that in one episode. So
all right.
Thank you guys. It's
Cheers,
been fun.
Guys. It's been awesome.
Cheers.